The city, before, June 22nd, 1941. You are 21 years old. You were born in Leningrad. You have lived your entire life within 4 kilometers of the Neva River, and you know the city the way you know your own hands. Which bridges flood in spring, which courtyards stay warm in November, which bakeries open before 6. Your mother lives on Lygovsky Prospect in a 3rd-floor apartment with 1 window facing east. You visit her on Sundays. You bring bread when you have it. The announcement comes over the radio at noon on June 22nd. Germany has attacked. The war has begun. You are sitting in the kitchen of your barracks with 3 other men, and nobody says anything for a long time. The radio keeps talking. You listen to it finish, and then you go outside, and the sky over Leningrad is the particular blue it gets in late June, a pale northern blue that lasts until nearly midnight, and the city is going about its Sunday the way it always does. People walking along the embankment, children in the park, the trams running on schedule. You report to your unit the next morning. Your commanding officer says the Germans will be stopped before they reach Leningrad. He says this with the certainty of a man reading from a document he did not write. The veterans in the room, men who fought in Finland in 1940, men who know what a retreating army looks like from inside one, say nothing. They clean their Mosin Nagant rifles and say nothing. Your mother does not know you have been assigned to the Leningrad front. You write her a letter that says you are stationed somewhere safe, and the food is adequate. You give it to the courier before you can change your mind. That letter is the last thing you say to her that is not true. The ring closes. September 8, 1941. The Germans move faster than anyone said they would. Yimi Group North drives across the Baltic states in weeks, not months, and by late August, the sound of artillery is audible from the city center. You are dug in south of the city near a town called Maga when the order comes that Maga has fallen. You do not fully understand what this means until your sergeant explains it. Mana was the last rail connection out of Leningrad. The city is now an island. 3 million people, surrounded on land, the only opening a stretch of Lake Ladoga to the east that the Germans do not yet control. No food coming in, no fuel, no medicine. The Luftwaffe begins bombing the Badayev warehouses on September 8th, and the food reserves burn for 3 days. The smoke visible from every window in the city. You can see it from your position, a column of black rising straight up in the still September air. Your line runs through forests and swamps south of the city. The Germans are close enough that you can sometimes hear their vehicles at night. They do not attack the city directly. Their generals have decided it is cheaper to starve Leningrad than to fight for it street by street. You understand this strategy from your position in the trench the same way you understand weather by looking at the sky. You can see what it means without being able to change it. You think about the apartment on Lygovsky Prospect, the window facing east, your mother who wakes at 5 every morning because she always has. You dig your trench a meter deeper and you do not think about it anymore. The first winter, November 1941 through March 1942. The temperature drops to 30 below zero in December, and the city begins to die in a way that has no military term for it. The bread ration inside Leningrad falls to 125 grams per day for civilians by November 20th. 125 grams. A small fist of bread that is not entirely bread, mixed with sawdust and cottonseed cake, and whatever the bakers can find to stretch the flour. Your ration at the front is larger because a soldier who cannot stand cannot hold a rifle, but not by much. You eat your 300 grams and you think about the 125 grams, and you eat your 300 grams again, and the math of it sits in your chest like something you cannot digest. The cold kills the water pipes, then it kills the trams, then it kills people who had survived everything else. People who made it through the bombing and the first shortages and the darkness of the November days, who simply stop one morning because their bodies have nothing left to burn. The city buries 100,000 people in the winter of 1941 and 42. It buries them in mass graves at a cemetery called Piskaryaskoye because the ground is frozen too hard for individual graves and there are not enough people left with the strength to dig them anyway. You hold your section of the line. The Germans shell your position daily. You have learned to tell by the sound which battery is firing and approximately where the round will land, a skill that has saved your life at least twice that you know of and possibly more times than that. You stop counting the close ones after a while because counting them makes the number too large to hold in your head comfortably. In February, you receive a letter from your mother. It is 3 sentences. She says she is well. She says the neighbors have been kind. She says do not worry. You read it 4 times looking for the thing she is not saying, which is everything. The Road of Life, winter 1941 through 1943. Lake Ladoga freezes in November, and by December the ice is thick enough to drive trucks across. They call it the Road of Life, Doroga Zhizni, a supply route 30 kilometers across the frozen lake from the eastern shore to the city. The Germans bomb it daily. The ice cracks in places from the weight of the trucks and the shells, and drivers go into the water with their loads and do not come up. The ice road is kept open 24 hours a day through the winter by men who know that stopping means the city stops with them. From your position you cannot see the lake, but you know it is there the way you know your own heartbeat, a fact that underlies everything else. The trucks that make it across bring flour and ammunition and occasionally letters. The trucks going back out carry children evacuated from the city. 500,000 people moved across the ice in the first winter, children wrapped in whatever their mothers could find, loaded into trucks that might or might not make it to the other side. You think about whether your mother is on one of those trucks? You think about this and then you stop thinking about it, because thinking about it changes nothing, and you need to be able to see clearly when you look through your rifle sight. One morning, a truck driver stops at your position to ask directions. He is maybe 19 years old. He has been driving the ice road for 6 weeks. He does not look 19 anymore. He asks his question and you answer it, and he drives away and you watch the truck until the trees take it, and then you go back to your trench. You never learn if he made it across. The long middle, 1942 through 1943. The siege finds its shape, and its shape is endurance. Your section of the front does not move significantly in either direction for most of 1942. You attack. The Germans push back. The Germans probe. You hold. The line shifts by hundreds of meters and then shifts back, and the men who moved it are replaced by other men, and the line is where it was. You build your position into the earth the way you build anything you intend to last, with care, with attention to the details that will matter later. Your bunker goes 4 meters down. You have a stove made from a shell casing. You have learned to sleep through artillery the way you once slept through traffic. The city behind you is still dying, more slowly now as the summer allows more supplies across the lake by barge, but still dying. The death toll from starvation in 1942 is somewhere between 400,000 and 700,000, depending on who is counting and how. The city that had 3 million people in June 1941 has perhaps 800,000 by the end of 1942. The rest evacuated or dead or both in ways the records do not always distinguish clearly. You receive 4 letters from your mother in 1942. She tells you nothing useful in any of them and everything necessary. She is alive. She found work at a factory making ammunition for the defense of the city. She says she is not hungry, which you do not believe, and that she sleeps well, which you choose to believe because the alternative is not useful to you. You write back when you can. You tell her the truth in the parts that do not matter and nothing at all in the parts that do. This is how people who love each other survive a siege. They build a language made of omissions and learn to read each other through the gaps. The Corridor, January 18, 1943. On January 12, 1943, the Red Army launches Operation Iskra, Spark, 2 forces driving toward each other through the German lines south of Lake Ladoga. You are not part of the assault force. You hold your section of the line and listen to the artillery to the east, heavier than you have heard it in months, continuous for days. On January 18th, the 2 forces meet. The corridor is 8 to 10 kilometers wide, a narrow strip of land south of the lake that breaks the ring. Not the siege itself, not yet, but a hole in it. The first supply train enters Leningrad through the corridor on February 7th. The city has been cut off for 506 days. You hear about it from your sergeant who heard it on the radio. He tells you in the morning, flat and factual, the way he tells you everything. You are eating your breakfast when he says it, and you finish eating before you respond, because you have learned not to let news, good or bad, interrupt a meal when meals are what they are. Then you put down your bowl and you sit for a moment and you think about a train pulling into Leningrad station and the people on the platform watching it arrive. You do not cry. You are 23 years old and you have been in this trench for 16 months, and you have forgotten how to do certain things that you used to know how to do without thinking. The last day, January 27th, 1944. Operation Neva 2 begins on January 14th, 1944. The final offensive to break the siege completely, to push the Germans far enough back that their artillery can no longer reach the city. You are part of it this time. You go forward through snow and frozen ground for 13 days, taking positions the Germans have held since September 1941. Positions they built into the earth as thoroughly as you built yours. Positions that cost what taking fortified positions always costs. On January 27, 1944, Leningrad is declared free of the siege. That night the city fires a salute, 324 artillery guns, 24 volleys. You are 20 kilometers south of the city, and you can see the light of it in the sky, a flickering brightness above the horizon that is not fire, not bombing, not the color of something burning. You stand in the snow and you watch the sky over Leningrad, and around you, the men are also watching and nobody says anything, because there is nothing to say that the light is not already saying. 872 days. You have been at the front for 872 days. You are 23 years old, 13 years old. The city behind you has lost somewhere between 800,000 and 1.1 million people to starvation, cold, and bombardment. The number depends on the source and what the source was willing to put in a document. The true number is probably the larger one. Return, February 1944. They give you 3 days leave, and you walk into the city for the first time in 2.5 years. Leningrad is standing. This is the first thing. The buildings are damaged, many of them, windows blown out and facades pocked with shrapnel. But the city is standing the way a person stands after something they should not have survived, with a particular stillness that is not peace but is the thing that comes after the worst of it is over. You walk to Lagovsky Prospect. The trams are not running yet. You walk the whole way. The streets are quieter than you have ever known them, not the quiet of Sunday morning but a different quiet. The quiet of a place that lost a third of its people and has not yet learned how to fill the space they left. Your mother opens the door before you knock. You do not know how she knew. She is smaller than you remember. Her face changed in ways that have nothing to do with age, the way a city changes when it has been through something that does not have a name yet. She looks at you for a moment without speaking and then she steps back to let you in and you go inside and she closes the door. You sit at the kitchen table where you sat every Sunday before the war. She puts bread on the table, real bread, not the 125-gram mixture of flour and sawdust and whatever else got them through the winter of 1941. Real bread, and you pick it up and you hold it and you do not eat it for a long time. Just hold it, because some things you need to hold before you can use them. At night you cannot sleep, the silence is wrong. For 872 days you slept to the sound of artillery, and your body learned that silence means something has changed, and something changing at night is usually bad. You lie in the dark, and you listen to the quiet, and you count. You count the men from your section, who are not counting anything anymore. You count the streets you walked through today, which ones had people on them and which ones did not. You think about the truck driver who stopped to ask directions. You never learned his name. You never learned if he made it across. Some things you carry because you chose to pick them up. Some things you carry because you were standing in the wrong place when they needed carrying. After 872 days you cannot always tell the difference anymore. That is what the siege left you with. Not the cold, not the hunger, not the sound of the guns that you still hear sometimes in the quiet. It left you with the inability to put things down, the way your mother left bread on the table for 2 years, even when there was none, setting the table anyway, keeping the form of the thing when the thing itself was gone. You pick up the bread, you eat it. Outside the window, the sky over Leningrad is the pale northern blue it gets in late June, the blue that lasts until midnight, the same sky it always was. The city is still here, you are still here, for now, that is enough.